Hey, what's up? It's Nicola Milan from Singer Secret, and today I'm going to share with you 10 tips that are going to help you perform on stage so much better. This is specifically for singers, and this video is going to be full of things that I've learned from my years of performing, mistakes that I've made that I wish I hadn't, and things that I've found that really work. So with all that said, let's jump straight in. Tip number one is always move the microphone stand behind you. So make sure this is one of the first things that you do. So many singers feel that the microphone stand is a comfort zone. It's kind of like this very skinny barrier between you and the audience. If you play a guitar, sometimes the guitar can also be this little barrier. But it really frees up the audience's access to you and your space on the stage if you do this one simple act of moving it behind you when you first start singing. And that brings us to tip number two. Always go large with your hand expressions. Now you have this free hand that's no longer clinging to the microphone stand. You can use it to add to the expression of what you're singing. Now the big important takeaway here is to go big. If you think about a dancer, dancers always stretch. It's always about the reach and the stretch. They go right to the end of the fingertips. They stretch their leg all the way out. They kind of don't like half-ass it and keep everything really close. They stretch, and if you do the same thing on stage, if you go a bit bigger, doesn't mean you have to be like all, yogaing on stage or anything, but if you're confident with your hand expressions, it makes a big difference to how confident and how good you look up on stage. Tip number three is to make sure there are no trip hazards on the stage when you're performing. This may seem like a given, right? Like, oh, the sound tech's going to set everything up and he's going to move the wires away. Yeah, doesn't always happen. So a lot of the time you're on stage, it's dark, you're teetering on like heels that are way too high, and there's a lot of trip hazards going on. A lot of wires, a lot of ends of like microphone stands and things like that that you could potentially trip over. So just make sure that everything is clear, otherwise, you're gonna go arse over and it's not gonna be pretty. Tip number four is to always acknowledge the audience when you walk on stage. I remember going to a Norah Jones concert. Don't get me wrong, I love Norah Jones, but she didn't really acknowledge the audience when she first came on. And I kind of felt a little bit insulted. I'm like, hey, I'm here to see you. How about just like giving us a wave or a little bit of a nod? Instead, she just like went straight into it, and it was a little bit of a downer for me. So I found that since watching that, I always give the audience like a little wave, before starting. I'll often not speak to them until after the first song, but I always give them flash a big smile and give them a little bit of a wave. Kind of lets them know, hi, I've recognized that you're here, I acknowledge you, we're gonna have a good time, let's go. The one exception to this is if, you're doing like an epic music production like, Michael Jackson used to do, and like the first bit of you coming up is like, I think he came up on the, a platform in the middle of the stage, and this is huge and this massive, big amphitheater kind of thing. And then he's got all the smoke and then the spotlight's there and he's kind of in this sort of position. But that's, it's entertaining as well. It's kind of like he was dance entertaining at that point. But if you're especially if you're in a bar or a jazz club and it's smaller, it's more intimate, make sure you say hi to your audience. Stagecraft tip number five is to go larger than life with your outfit. Or at least look really put together and cool, like someone that other people would want to emulate. There's this one quote that has always stayed with me. It was from Marilyn Monroe, and she said, "My fans expect me to be glamorous. I will not disappoint them." So whenever I'm on stage, my audience knows that it's going to be jazz, it's going to be fun, there's going to be costumes, and then if I walk out in jeans and a t-shirt, that's really going to let them down, right? So you want to make sure that you are always exceeding your audience's expectation in the visual aspect of your performance. Tip number six is to openly laugh at your stuff-ups on stage. There is nothing worse than if you make a big stuff-up and then you like cringe and then you're like, oh my God, embarrassment, then all that does is just like exacerbates the whole problem. The band is cringing for you, the audience is cringe, you're cringing, there's a massive awkward silence, and it's just horrible, right? But if you stuff up and you laugh about it and you let the audience in on it, so for example, you know, you're performing, you're speaking into the microphone, and then you're talking to your piano player going, oh my God, I really stuffed that up. What kind of intro was that? Let's try that again. And then quite often your piano player is going to say something like, yeah, good one, you know, whatever. And then you know, the rest of the band might chip in because you're all relaxed or whatever. And it actually can become, here I am, I'm talking to the microphone. It can become a highlight of the performance instead of the worst part of the performance. Okay, stagecraft tip number 7 is to call your band by their nicknames or their first names or whatever it is that you generally call them. Example of this is I call my piano player Benny. His name's Ben Clark, but I call him Benny. And so I'll talk to the audience on stage and I'll talk to Ben on stage and I'll say, hey Benny, blah, 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 blah. And the audience picks up on this and it actually endears Ben to the audience. It includes him more in the performance. Instead of all that attention sort of being on the singer, he's more included. And they know his name a lot. They can really remember it a lot easier because they remember, oh, that's Ben, that's Benny, you know. And the audience loves it. Like, they still call him Ben Clark because they kind of know that only I get to call him by his nickname. But it really works, and it's kind of helping them get to know you a little bit better. Tip number 8 is to take water up with you on stage in a vessel that is easy to consume from. So, let me explain. Picture this. It's a dark jazz club. I'm in a very tight gown that goes to the floor. It has a very large and long split up the front. I'm in high heels. It's dark. I'm tall, right? So I'm trying to bend down to grab a glass of water that's on the ground because there's not enough room for a table next to me for the water to sit on. And you know, it's a very, like, the stage is up high, the audience is kind of looking this way, you know, it's a knicker flashing moment, right? So what I do is I take a drink bottle that doesn't spill and it's really tall, so I can just grab it with my fingertips like this and then flip up the lid and then take a drink that way. It just saves my life all the time because I tend to wear quite a lot of short skirts or tight dresses and things like that on stage. Yeah, you just want something that's going to be really, you know, easy. Of course, if you're, you know, not in tight stuff, it's less of an issue for you, but just something to consider, yeah, because you want to have that water there, but you want to be able to grab it without flashing the audience your underpants. Tip number 9, and that is to make sure that you sound check your vocals with the band at full volume during sound check, right? So the last thing you want to do is just to sound check your voice only, because quite often what will happen is there's not enough fold back, and as soon as they start going off, like, and you know, because they get louder, especially as the gig's going on, and then if you can't hear yourself, that really sucks. And I mean, generally if you have a good sound tech, you should just be able to kind of go like this, and they'll know that that means sound vocals, you know, fold back, like put up the volume. But sometimes the sound technician will just like bugger off, and you know, the band won't hit full volume until, like, you know, song 3 or something like that. So you're left with no sound tech and you can't hear yourself. Quite often the band can't hear you either, and it's just a whole lot of wrong. You can go off pitch, all sorts of bad things will happen. So just make sure you sound check yourself with full volume band behind you during sound check. Makes your life so much easier. And my last tip that is going to help you perform on stage so much better, and this tip has saved my life in so many instances. I've been caught out by this one. Never ask the audience a direct question that requires an answer. So if you do this, like saying something like, how the ladies doing? And they're going, woo, you know, that doesn't actually require an answer. You can kind of like, just move on from that. Like, I'll often say, has anyone been to London? Oh, it's fantastic. If you haven't been, I recommend you go. But if you ask something that does need an answer, 3 one of three things is potentially going to happen. Number one, no one will answer and you will get crickets. And it's really awkward. It's kind of like, you know, in math class in high school, when the teacher asks a question and asks people to put their hand up and like no one answers. Yeah, it's kind of like that. Awkward. Or B, someone will say something negative and it brings the entire vibe of the show down. So just don't give them that opportunity. I mean, they're not trained performers. You know, they didn't realize that them saying the wrong answer is going to stuff up the entire show, but it happens. So just don't let them. Or C, and this is probably the worst one, it will encourage hecklers. People will say things, they will say things that are inappropriate, and it will encourage more and more people to start talking out of turn, which it depends on the kind of band that you're in, but if you're doing kind of like jazz or blues or something kind of like, or if you're in a bar and you're just singing like soft stuff, it could be quite off-putting. It could be a little bit rude depending on the type of hecklers. I've had it before at a show, and these hecklers were, you know, they were doing it in jest, so they were quite pleasant hecklers, but it was still off-putting. It kind of made me laugh during the performance, and it was off-putting to other audience members who just wanted to listen. So yeah, just rule number one, just don't ask the audience any questions if it needs a direct answer. Play it safe. So there you go. Those are my 10 tips to help you perform on stage so much better. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give me a thumbs up because it really does help the channel. Make sure you subscribe for more singing tutorials and videos like this. And if you are learning how to sing and you would like some free vocal warm-ups, I've got those for you over on my website, singerssecret.com. I will leave a link in the description where you can grab them below. I have 4 free vocal warm-ups for you. Free vocal. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again next time.